Welcome back to the Daily Drum on WHUR and Sirius XM Channel 141. I'm Harold Fisher. The number one issue for Republican voters this election season was the economy. We heard time and time again about inflation, the high cost of groceries, and even housing. And of course, as we know, the Republican candidate for president won the election. Well, tonight, we're talking about what this election could mean for your personal finances, your bottom line. My guests are financial advisor Muriel Garr, Dr. Curtis E. Kidd Telemark, director of the HPS Center of Financial Excellence with the Howard University School of Business, and political analyst Dr. Avis Jones DeWeaver. Thank you all so much for joining the conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
So let me share a couple of facts with you. Since October 31st, the Dow Jones Industrial Average has increased more than 5% from approximately 41,763 on October 31st to today's open of 44,032 points. Cryptocurrency, like Bitcoin, increased nearly 30% from 70,242 on October 31st to opening around 91,243 as of this morning. And here's something else for those of us of a certain age. On October 19th of 1987, the Dow Jones closed at 1,738.74, making the infamous Black Monday when it dropped by 22.6% in a single day. As of today, the Dow Jones has climbed approximately 34,800 points. That's an increase of 1,900% over 37 years. Whether your politics are red or blue, the thing we're talking about tonight is the color green. I want to first ask you, Dr. Avis, because I'm sure you've also been kind of keeping your eye on, on your finances. What are your thoughts about the shift, particularly after the election on November 5th? We've seen the stock market grow up, not just the Dow Jones, but we've seen Standard & Poor's and the other indices go up. Good thing or bad thing?
Well, if you have money invested in the stock market, obviously it's good for you. It's too bad that most Americans don't, and especially most Black people don't. What we saw, I believe, is businesses reacting to the fact that they know that under a Trump presidency, they're going to receive huge tax reductions, and perhaps that was a little bit of a celebratory impact as related to that. When I think about the economy, though, I think about it in a much broader context. I think about it from the standpoint that he has already said that he's going to, in essence, target a large number of the federal workforce, which we know are disproportionately populated by Black people. It, in many ways, was the opening for the Black middle class when other places would not hire Black people at a middle class sort of salary. And so I'm concerned about what's going to happen to the Black community with regards to being able to stay in those types of jobs. I also see the specific targeting that they have around DE&I, and I know a lot of business owners who have built their businesses in that space that have already been targeted. And it looks like there's more that's on the plate with regards to targeting that, not only within the federal government, but within the military and even on college campuses. And so when I think about that in totem, I see a situation where the Black community is really going to be in the crosshairs of a Trump administration. Though the stock market may look good, employment and other business opportunities where we can disproportionately be found, it seems like I may take a serious hit.
Mm-hmm. Dr. Telemark, political promises notwithstanding, what is the reality when it comes to what a president can control regarding the economy?
Yeah, good question. So, according to some of the statements that Dr. Avis DeWeaver just cited, specific to one really sort of popped my ears, and that is deregulation, right? So domestically, really, President-elect Trump would need the Senate. He would need the House. All sorts of a culmination of parties coming together to make sure that he can get his domestic across.
Looks like we may have lost Dr. Telemark. We'll bring him back when we can. So Muriel, with all of the things that are happening, these financial machinations, and these things literally are not week to week, day to day. They are sometimes moment to moment. But for your average person who may have a 401k or an IRA or something like that, what should they be focusing on right now in the wake of last week's election results?
Well, first of all, you said for the average person, and if I were to piggyback off of my colleagues and talk about it from the standpoint of the average Black person, unfortunately, the data shows that we are not participating in 401ks or 403bs or even 529s, et cetera. So now is, in my opinion, the wake up time for us to really start looking at what are the opportunities that exist that are definitely going to increase in value that we need to actually take part in. I've been partnering with you for some time, and I'm very much an advocate for not leaving money on the table. So if you work for an employer and the employer is offering you a 401k or a 403b and they providing a match, or for whatever reason or excuse you found that you don't want to participate, now is not the time to do that. As you said in the opening of the show, it's not about red or blue. It is about green, and green is what moves the dial. So we need to be more mindful of how we allocate our dollars in order to take part in the economic growth in order to offset what are going to be some other potential tragedies that could adversely impact our communities.
What do you mean by potential tragedies?
Well, my colleague spoke to it at the beginning of the segment when we talk about downsizing or right sizing the federal government, and how in many communities, particularly one where this show actually is headquartered, although it has an international reach, you're talking about the government represents the major employer and the largest employer for Black and brown people. And when we start talking about a right sizing or downsizing or eliminating jobs, or however you want to spend it, it is going to adversely impact Black and brown people individually. And it is also going to impact communities. And so we need to figure out how we are going to position ourselves so that we will not end up with pneumonia and instead just end up with a cold, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I definitely understand that, which brings me back to, Dr. Avis. I remember during the first Trump administration that, again, the stock market, where a lot of wealthy individuals and upper middle class individuals had their money, and we saw a lot of money being made. Well, but suffice it to say, that's just why I mentioned Black Friday way back in 1987. Mm-hmm. Despite its ups and downs, the stock market increases, mm-hmm. president to president, administration to administration. So for those people, Dr. Avis, who were thinking that Trump may be better than Biden, isn't there a message for that long-term view?
Absolutely, it is. The stock market was surging even before this election. So quiet as it's kept. Okay. So you're exactly right. Over the long term, it generally goes up. And so it does make sense. I have to agree. It makes sense to get into the game. If you're sitting here waiting for another low point, you're wasting time. Okay. Nobody can predict. All right. And so the best thing is it would have been better had you gotten in 20 years ago, but it's not too late to get in today. All right. Because over the long term, it's going to be in your favor. And why not have your money working for you instead of you always having to work for your money?
Mm-hmm. But Muriel, isn't it difficult for some people, and particularly when we are talking about our people, to get them to understand that there is no microwave result for their money? And even if they may not necessarily be paying attention to the stock market, even if the upcoming administration is going to be able to reduce the price of eggs, reduce the price of bacon, and reduce inflation, even as it has already been reducing over the past year or so, why is it so difficult to convince people to make money moves?
As I was listening to you tee up that question, my mind went back to a conversation that I had many years ago with a civil rights advocate. And he said to me, Muriel, stop blaming the victim. And I looked at him and, I came back with all of this money theory. I don't understand why it's so difficult. You should understand this and understand that. And he looked at me after he said, stop blaming the victim. And he also said, you're a little bit of a fool. And I'm not applying that to you, Harold. So I'm just going to.
Of course not.
I'm applying that to me in answering the question that you put forth. If you're coming from a family and you happen to be the first generation person that's going to college. Now let's just be mindful. This is 2024. The Civil Rights Act was passed in 1960s, and women gained access to credit in 1973, where women could get access to credit without the benefit of a man. That's 50 years ago. So
only 50 years ago.
Only 50 years ago. So let us be clear that this is not two generations removed. This generally, in many instances, one generation removed, where you had the opportunity to buy a house in the neighborhood that you wanted to buy a house in. You could go purchase the type of car that you wanted, go on vacation where you wanted to go on vacation. You can wear shoes that were not Bobos, and you could wear designer clothes that you weren't not getting from a five or dime, or that a talented aunt or someone had made from you from the scraps of the housekeeper that she cleaned homes for. And so when we think about that, we have to understand that we as a people have gone through an awful lot mentally just to be able to feel like, or to justify the fact that we already know we have value, but other people said that we did not. And part of how we attribute that and work that out is being able to go and get what we want, eat what we want, buy what we want. And so then you're going to say, Muriel, y'all need to think about this. Why are you leaving money on the table? You need to save a portion of it and put it here and put it there. And they're like, for what? And so part of it is, I think for me, and I can only speak for me, my responsibility is to help them understand that either you are part of the game or the game is playing you. And help them understand how, if you're leaving, if you're not participating, for example, I always use this 401k plan. If your employer is offering you a 401k and they're providing match money, if you don't participate, you leaving money on the table. Who wants to give money away? You do not want to do that. And even if they're not giving you a great match, but you have an opportunity to do a before tax contribution, let me help you understand how by doing that, you can actually reduce your tax liability and put some money aside for a rainy day. So I think it is a responsibility for people like me who have that knowledge and experience and happen to be a Black or brown person, not to talk at my brothers and sisters who look like me, but talk to them to help them see how it would benefit them to make those moves and changes. Is that making sense?
I think it does. And I'm going to continue to allow that to make sense after the break. So please stay with us Don't forget, you can hear this and every edition of the Daily Drum Insight segment via podcast on WHUR.com. The original Quiet Storm with Raheem Devon is next on WHUR. I'm Harold Fisher. This conversation continues on Sirius XM channel 141 and 96.3 HD2 in just a few seconds. Welcome back to the Daily Drum on Sirius XM channel 141. I'm Harold Fisher. We continue our discussion about what this election could mean for your personal finances, your bottom line. My guests are financial advisor Muriel Garr and political analyst Dr. Avis Jones DeWeaver. Before the break, Dr. Avis, Muriel was asking about what she was sharing. Did it make sense? From a political perspective, does it make sense to you?
It definitely makes sense. And it makes sense in that I think oftentimes if people find themselves habitually in a survival mode, in a state of survival, it's hard for them to see how they can set aside money for a rainy day, because rainy days seem to be every day, right? And then on the other side of the coin, I definitely understand if you have been denied access to certain luxuries of life, to certain indicators of success in life. I can understand the desire to say, I've worked hard to get here. I want to treat myself to that, right? So I can understand both sides of that coin. I do think, though, and I also would say I would sort of layer on a third layer to that. For those of us who are the first generation in our families to get to a certain level economically, if you compare us, one of the things I've always looked at, I used to study the Black wealth, white wealth dynamic. And one of the areas that's oftentimes not looked at with regards to the Black-white wealth gap is the fact that those of us who are the first generation to break into the middle class and above, we're oftentimes supporting family members that are beyond our family unit. All right. So revenue or income that could be set aside and put into wealth building vehicles, we're giving that to grandma, we're giving that to auntie, we're giving that to mama, we're giving that to nieces and nephews. Like, we're the one in the family who made it. And so everybody else, when they need something, guess who they turn to, right? We're trying to lift up the whole village on our one back, right? And so this is a challenge that I think that other communities aren't facing in the same way. And so I do think it's a little bit of all of those things that come into play that can account for the differential that we see between the Black and white communities with regards to the percentage of people that actually do participate in the stock market and other wealth building vehicles. They just either can't do it, they don't see the need to do it right now, or they have these other responsibilities that they just see as much more urgent.
I think you make such an excellent point. We often see that in Black professional football, basketball, baseball players, where often, and I've actually seen this, having worked in the rural South, where the entire family is putting all of their support behind that one talented athlete with hopes that that person will get the D1 scholarship and eventually make it to the pros, so that that person will then be able to, if at the very least, buy mom and dad a house.
Yeah, but it doesn't even have to be that extreme. It could be the first one to get a corporate job. It could be the first college graduate in the family that actually gets that professionals, that first six-figure job. I mean, you could be the first person in your family to get a six-figure job. It's not, you don't have to be a millionaire to be in this position, right? Yeah. So I'm just saying that for many of us, if we are just doing appreciably better than our siblings and still have this love and care, we're kind of in that sandwich generation. A lot of us, we're caring for, how much it costs to be able to take care of elderly parents is astronomical, for example. So all of these things put a lot of pressure on us. And because we tend to be a more communal culture than an individual culture, quiet as it's still kept, we care if our mom and dads have a roof over their heads. We care if our siblings' car broke down and they can't get to work. And so we're going to do the things that are necessary to help them. But when we're doing that, that's money that could have been invested in the stock market, but we instead choose to invest it in the people that we love.
Let me ask you this also, Dr. Avis. As I said, we are at the end of the election season, but the politics continue. And for those people who are not happy with the outcome of the election, what would you tell them about making financial decisions and separating how they feel about the election from their bottom line?
The bottom line is you got to be able to look out for yourself. We've all heard that term, nobody's coming to save you. I would argue, given what I said at the very top of the show, not only is it that nobody's coming to save you, some people are actually going to be coming after you in this administration. And you have to be prepared to be there, to be okay. If I were you, I would be looking to figure out ways in which I can bring in multiple streams of income. I'll be looking to figure out ways in which I can fortify my savings and make sure that I have a little cushion there in case mine is one of the jobs that gets the chopping block. I would really want to think very strategically about how can I make it, right, if I had to, another way. Because I think so many of us just assume, especially if we're in the federal workforce, that good government job, like we have been told that we'll be able, we are guaranteed to have this thing until we retire, and then we're going to have that good government retirement and we will be fine. And we bought into that story. This person is saying he doesn't give a damn about that. So we need to start thinking about other ways in which we can be okay financially. And if we haven't thought about investments, if we haven't thought about being very shrewd in terms of our savings, but if we also haven't thought about other ways in which we can bring in additional revenue streams, then now's the time to start thinking about that, because we need to be able to make it, especially in this moment. We need to be able to make it on our own.
So let me ask you this, Muriel. This is kind of a two-part question. For the people who perhaps don't have retirement accounts because of their job, or even if they're in business for themselves, what do you recommend for them? And secondly, for those who are already deeply immersed in stocks, bonds, investments, even if it's just a little bit, are the plans different for both of those categories, or do you have recommendations for each as to what they need to do starting today?
I'm probably going to answer this question in a different way, Harold. And
go ahead.
And I'm going to answer it based on what Dr. Avis said right before. What I would suggest that people do is actually be selective on where they put their money and where they spend their money. So if you're not pleased with the current political situation, or what we will be ushering in on Martin Luther King holiday in 2025, then the first thing I would encourage individuals to do is look at where you are spending your money. And not from the standpoint of whether or not you're going to get Starbucks 7 days a week at $7 or however much it is, and no offense to Starbucks, but who are you giving your power to by virtue of where you are leaving your money? And so that could mean that you change the type of vehicle that you drive, because by virtue of you purchasing certain vehicles, you are creating cash flow potentially for someone whose ideology does not align with yours.
Mm-hmm.
Where you buy your clothing, your shoes, your fragrance, your hardware, the developer that built your home. So I think we should be more selective on where we take the hard-earned dollars that we have and where we spend those hard-earned dollars. I think it is unfortunate that, particularly for us as Black and Brown people, that our money has not circulated in our community the number of times that it does in other communities before it leaves. I think we should be more strategic about investing our money by means, and this is a different type of investment from what you were speaking to, but it is a powerful investment because money creates power, which creates change. And we should be more selective in where we spend and invest our dollars to create the opportunities that we seek and desire. That's first. And then second of all, even if we are investing in the market, well, it would be, in my opinion, beneficial for us, because yes, money is green and yes, it does move things, but let's be mindful of the companies that we are investing our dollars in. If the ideology of that company does not align with what you support, then why are you buying that stock?
Mm-hmm.
Why are you? Because by virtue, you're like, oh, well, because it's performed. And when you look at how it's performed year over year, it's up 40%. Oh, so that 40% that it's up is actually helping to keep you in bondage. Did you ever think about that? Because it's putting in place individuals whose ideology does not align with yours. So let us think about, supporting those things that support us, supporting restaurants that support us, supporting Black-owned businesses that align with what we believe in. And if you happen to be a government employee that may be faced with having to find another purpose in life, one of the things I said, having a job just means you just over broke. And the fact that a political candidate can just dangle over your head.
So true. Amen.
Well, you asked me. A political candidate could dangle over your head that I'm coming after your job and you're going to have to find another way to make an income. Hold on a minute. Because I've had some time to think about this. So Harold, cut me off when I go too far. Because
never that. You? Oh no, never that.
I think there was a Black person that had something to do with the invention of the traffic light. I think there was a Black person that had something to do with an invention of a machine that has to do with keeping your heart pumping when you're having a heart attack. I think it was a Black person that came up with an invention that had something to do with health and wellness. I ain't trying to go there, but we as Black people are resilient and we are some of the brightest folk on the face of the planet. We don't need to be just over broke. We can be inventors. We can be business owners. We can own financial institutions. Come on, let us get out of this comfort zone that we were placed in. And in my opinion, in order to actually pull back the strengths that we had, because when you get comfortable, then you don't seek to go out and be extraordinary. So now, since they said they're going to take our just over broke, take my just over broke, and I'm getting ready to start a business. And guess what? You're going to end up being my number one consumer because I'm going to have a product that you're going to need in order for you to get from A to Z. We need to take back our power.
Okay, so to that point, and yes, applause.
Yes, I love that. Every word.
So Dr. Avis, with that said, what do you say to those people who believe that their vote doesn't matter, so where I put my money doesn't matter?
Oh, Jesus Christ. Okay. Y'all. Woo, Lord. Well,
I'm here to make your head hurt.
We did it with that one, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Listen, it's so frustrating to me, honestly. It's so frustrating to me because when people feel that way, what they're actually doing is they're abdicating their power to people whose interests are misaligned with theirs. And they are allowing somebody else to basically take them by the nose and do with them whatever the hell they want to do with them. That's what's going on. And so this is why you not only have to vote, as was mentioned, this is why you need to be very strategic about flexing your economic power. As a community, we're at like $1.3 trillion in annual economic buying power. That's powerful. That's more than many countries, okay? It's more than Russia. Y'all, we richer than Russia, all right? Listen, what I need for people to really understand is that we have power. Now, are we going to use it? And are we going to use it strategically? That is the question. So when you choose to pull yourself out of the game to say, I am not going to vote, all right, what you're actually doing is that you're creating an easier pathway for somebody to come in there and exploit you or hurt you in many ways. Like, we're not just economically, other things that are on the chopping block, or maybe just the resurrection block is a better way to think of it, is stop and frisk. Who wants that back? Good luck. You just created a situation where you can be stopped for no reason, where there is no qualified immunity, where that police officer can do whatever they want to you. And they're not going to be held accountable for it at all. It's going to be even worse than it's been in the past. Let me put it like that. Okay. There's so many things that politics and policy impacts. And so to me, voting is all about being able to have some say in that matter. Now, it doesn't mean that every time you vote, your candidate will win, but if more of us would vote, we would have greater power in that way. One last thing I would say about it. If voting wasn't that important, why do you think that you would have people figuring out ways to make it harder for you to vote? Why do you think you would have people passing laws to say that it's now against the law to give people food and water when they're standing in line trying to vote? Why do you think it is? Do you think it's an accident that there are longer voter lines, that on average it takes Black people twice as long to vote than it takes their white counterparts to vote? No, that's not an accident. That is strategic. They put less voting machines in our neighborhoods just to create those lines to make it more difficult for people to vote. I mean, I could go on and on and on and on, but all of those things has happened and more, specifically because they're trying to stop you from voting. So you are colluding with the enemy when you are not flexing your voting power. And when you're not being strategic with how you spend your monetary power, you are doing the very same thing.
Muriel, let me go back to some foundational things about money in this post-election season. For people, let me just throw out a figure. Whether you win the lottery on a scratch off or you lose a beloved relative and you realize that all of a sudden you have $10,000 in cash in front of you. What do you do with that?
Well, the first thing you don't do is you definitely don't go out and try to make everybody happy. And the irony is,
red bottoms are only 10% of that 10,000.
Yeah, but you know, I love the way you are lining up these questions tonight, because you really it can be answered multiple ways, and you do that intentionally to make people think.
Well, and I also want people to understand, which is why you are on this program specifically, that to understand that there are options. And I'm not going to say $1 million. I'm not going to say 100,000. I'm not going to say $50,000. I think that $10,000 is more realistic. When you have someone who perhaps has an estate that is settled, or that favorite aunt, or even the church member that you took food to when they were ill, puts you in their will. And in the end, it's his $10,000, and overbroke or not, there are options, and there are also options of mistakes that you can make as well.
But those options, what tends to happen is we make a quick decision without consulting those who could best advise us on what steps to take. And you know, Harold, that one of the things that I've always talked about is having your financial board of advisors, a tax consultant, a banker, an investment professional. And it sounds like, oh, wow, that's like, okay, she's way out there somewhere and she's not really talking to us. But what tends to happen when we have these windfalls is that when we come into the windfall, we don't have a plan. And the plan and I'm not saying a plan for a windfall, but what is our strategic plan for our life? What is it that we want to do? What are our priorities? Is it a priority to go back to school and get a degree? Is it a priority to get some of this debt taken care of? Is it a priority to get me some kind of car that's reliable because Nellie keeps breaking down every time I go put the key in her? And that comes with having a plan. And so first, we should, even in our brokenness, we need to have some type of financial life plan. Even in our brokenness, that's the only way you're going to get out of debt is you have a get out of debt plan. So when something does happen and you get this boatload of money, you can then look at where you are financially and figure out how you are going to attack it. And the last thing you want to do is when you get a windfall is that you take 100% of that windfall and put it into X, because doing that means you're at risk for trying to get another windfall, which is never going to occur. And so I would say that you need to look at what your plan is for you in your life. And if you don't have one, you need to set a plan before you set the plan to spend the money. And then you need to consult those individuals, licensed, bonded, credit check, insured, that can help you make a wise decision on how you want to spend and allocate that money. Everybody is not going to invest in the stock market. Now, we've talked about how the stock market has gone up, how it's gone up year over year, and if you would have gotten over in it then, But one of the things that we've not talked about, and I think is very important to our listeners, is the stock market is like rolling dice. Any money you put in the stock market is not insured, which means just like you can win money, you can lose money. And so it's important that individuals know before you start rolling in the stock market game, you need to make sure you're going to be able to pay for your lights, your heat, gas in the car, feed your children, because you can lose just as much money as you can make. And so it's very important that we understand that, and that we are putting the mask on ourselves first financially, even when we do get a huge chunk of money. If you get $10,000, and for a lot of people, that's more than, $18,000 is the average amount a person would make if they were making minimum wage. So if you got a child that wants to go to school, then maybe you're going to put a portion of that money into a 529, which is a tax deferred education plan where the money that you put in there, you do not pay taxes on, and it grows year over year. Things of that nature. But, again, it starts with having a plan. What is your plan for you in your life?
Your thoughts about Dr. Avis moving forward for those who, again, did not necessarily like the results of the election. Do you have to heal before you start thinking about your finances, or do you compartmentalize and you cry a little bit at night, but then you focus on the green during the day? Because, and the reason I say that, even slightly tongue in cheek, and then this is why I go back to the whole stock market thing and investment and all of those kinds of things, because as we know, those who did not like the outcome of the election were in a bit of a funk last week. Some may still be this week. They may be funky until the end of the year or whatever.
Yeah.
But at some point, pardon the phrase, you have to pick yourself up by the bootstraps and carry on.
Absolutely. And you're exactly right. I mean, I think a lot of people had a very emotional reaction to this election. It doesn't sit right with them. And not just because of the outcome, it's because of what it has shown us about people around us that we thought treated us and had a better sense of respect for us and had a different moral compass than we found out they did. Okay. And so I think all of that has been very jarring for people. It's kind of like going through the stages of grief. So I do understand that, there is different emotional reactions that it sometimes take people's different layers to get through over time. Some people can make their way through that process quicker than others. But as you say, at the end of the day, we can't allow that to defeat us, because we have to take responsibility for what is going to happen in our lives and how that's going to impact us and the people around us that we love. And so at some point, we're going to need to focus on that. And I would say one thing that I think, especially Black women, have been very clear about in the aftermath of this election is that we've been doing a whole lot of things for a whole lot of years for a whole lot of people. And a lot of these people that we've been there for in various different scenarios on the front lines with, were not there with us. And so I think a lot of Black women have looked at this election to sort of reassess, how are we going to spend our time, our treasure, our attention, and our talents moving forward? And many of us are looking at that to really sort of reorient our priorities and putting us at the top of that list. All right. And I completely understand that. And so at the end of the day, it's become very clear to us that we have to be here for us. And that means now thinking with this new dynamic, with this new landscape, with what we know is on the horizon, what can we do to make sure that we're okay? What can we do to make sure that our families are okay? What can we do to make sure our communities are okay? First and foremost. And at this moment, I think it's time that we start to turn our attention to that, because once, as I mentioned, craziness has already started in terms of the selections that are being floated around right now for the cabinet, in terms of certain policy positions that are being dangled right now that are said will be put into place come January. And so now is the moment to be fortified and be ready for that shift and be ready to move forward in spite of that. We have survived over 400 years of almost everything that they have tried to throw at us, and we are still here. We are resilient and a brilliant people. This clown is not going to take us out, but it's going to require us to be very, very focused on what we need to do to make sure that we're okay in every environment, including a new Trump reality, at least for the next 4 years.
And I would say in closing, just as you said, Dr. Avis, whether you like the outcome of the election or not, you have to look for opportunities. You have to look at things that maybe 99% of what is coming may not benefit you, but there may be 1% of something that you may be able to take advantage of, whether it's economically, the policies, trying to get in where you fit in, even if it's information that you could possibly use. Because again, like the stock market, things are always going to go up.
Yeah.
Things are always going to go up. Let us
Harold,
hope so.
if I could just add one thing.
You can't actually, because I am out of time, Muriel, unfortunately. I am out of time. I know, but I would love for you to, but I am completely out of time. But this will not be the last time that I have you, because it wasn't the first time. And I look forward to talking to you again. Muriel Garr, Dr. Avis Jones DeWeaver, thank you, ladies, so very, very much. I'm sorry we weren't able to get Dr. Telemaque back, but I'm looking forward to picking his brain during another conversation. Again, ladies, thank you so very, very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That is the Daily Drum for this Thursday, November 14th. I'm Harold Fisher.